Rwanda is famous for two things. One is the gorillas that tourists flock to see in their thousands, and the second is the genocide that took place approximately 22 years ago when the international community stood by and allowed stroke watched when up to 1 million people were massacred within 100 days. And while gorillas are crucial to the Rwandan economy, gorillas bring in more money to the Rwandan economy than all other aspects of the Rwandan economy put together. And while the genocide that defines modern day Rwanda should never ever be forgotten, Rwanda itself is much more than guerrillas and genocide. Kigali is a thriving, bustling city, the capital city of Rwanda, and venturing further afield, which we did in the 2 weeks we stayed there, we found the Rwandan landscape and the Rwandan countryside and the Rwandan people to be amazing and well worth the visit that we made. Rwanda is called the country of 1,000 hills, and from Kigali itself you can see evidence of this and you understand why it's called that. As you travel through the country, the name becomes even more apparent, as does the industry, the people and the hard work that they put into. Despite this hard work, Rwanda is a very poor country. It has a population twice the size of Scotland, i.e. about 10 million people in a country that is actually half the size of that of Scotland. So there is always people in pressure of space everywhere, and there's a lot of poverty in Rwanda. However, people do not starve in Rwanda. It is an incredibly fertile country, as you will see throughout this video, and people are able to feed themselves, although they do live in poverty, especially in rural areas. The Hotel Mille Collines was made famous by the movie Hotel Rwanda, which outlines the genocide and the people who are saved within this hotel. The genocide, which took place in over 100 days in 1994, had actually been well planned in advance and involved the wholesale slaughter of Tutsis by militant Hutus. There are genocide memorials throughout Rwanda, which you can visit. This one in Kigali, with its mass graves, was also a very peaceful haven for people to walk and to reflect on what happened and to think about how this should never take place again. When you visit the Kigali Genocide Memorial, not only do you hear about the history of the genocide, but you're also confronted by this wall of names with many blanks in it. They want to honour the dead, and they want to make sure that all the people who were massacred get recognition, but it's a very costly business and they want to protect the living before they can honour the dead. Bisesero Genocide Memorial is another very peaceful but poignant reminder of what happened during the genocide. Here you can see thousands of skulls and bones epitomising or showing you how people were murdered. What amazed me is just how and why could this happen in such a remote and beautiful area of the world of Rwanda. And here we have a very beautiful church dedicated to the memory of the genocide with the slogan "Never Again." The sad fact is that the Catholic Church, along with the international community, stood back and allowed this to happen, and indeed the Catholic Church were hugely implicated in it, with priests sometimes leaving their churches to allow, knowing that people would be massacred, and even on occasions horrifically engaging in the massacre themselves. It just is beyond belief what happened in this country. But what is even more remarkable is that the country is trying to heal itself in a spirit of forgiveness and reconciliation. Religion is very important in Rwanda, with 98% of the population professing to have religious beliefs. Most are Christians. Roman Catholics lead the field with 57%, 26% for Protestants and 11% for Seventh-day Adventists. There's a small, less than 5% Muslim population. We attended a church service one of the Sundays that we were in Rwanda. We just happened to be passing by, heard the music and decided to join in. The people were delighted to see us. The minister came up and had a chat with us and wanted us to speak to the congregation, which we did, and the people cheered and clapped. We also I interacted with the children, and it seemed quite acceptable for children to walk up and down. There was a lot of dancing and singing in the service, and much livelier than the church services that I know that are in this country, so it made for a very interesting and entertaining hour. At the end of the service, as we were making our way back to our hotel, we were followed by probably about 100 children who just walked along and danced with us and sang, and they kept asking questions of me. They wanted to know the English of various parts of the body and kept asking me if I was a teacher. Starbucks coffee is one of the major employers in this area, and the children certainly looked a lot better dressed and well cared for than the children that we'd seen in other areas of Rwanda and the more remote poorer villages. I guess part of it was that they were all in their Sunday best because they were at church. But I think, in fact, the whole area is a much more prosperous area than some of the others that we've been in Rwanda. I hope you enjoy listening to the choir singing and watching the children dancing, and I also hope that it gives you a flavour of what religion means to the people of Rwanda.
can have a job to work.
Yeah.
They can go to the local factories. Coffee factory.
Mas como você ia já? I want to joke sometimes, but I'm joking with you. Push beautiful. What are you saying? Don't see what I say.
This week's function.
Uri kumwaragira? Uri kumwaragira mbese? Began with 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Yeah. But we are on the very aggressive. Nivic. Vamos de novo.
What is her name?
My name is Christine.
My name
When you visit Rwanda, you'll be struck by the number of children that there are, and by the fact that, as in many third world countries, the children are free to kind of roam around, and there doesn't seem to be any suggestion that they will come to any harm. They're very friendly to tourists and very curious, particularly in the rural areas. I think I previously said that Rwanda is a very small country, about half the size of Scotland, but it has a population of twice the size of Scotland. That is a problem because the birth rate among rural villages in particular is something approaching 5 per family, which makes it very difficult for the people who are having that number of children to feed themselves and to feed their children well. There is a programme in Rwanda called Vision 2020, and that programme is designed to try to reduce rural poverty in 2 ways. One is to bring electricity and water into some of the villages. A lot of the very poor remote villages just do not have electricity or running water. People have to go to a well, and the water isn't always particularly clean. The other thing that the government are trying to do is bring education to Rwanda. Every child is entitled to free primary school education. The problem for some of the poorer families is that the government does not pay for books and uniform, and some families cannot afford to send their children to school because they cannot afford to buy books and uniform. I guess part of it is also that if you're struggling to survive on a daily basis, sending your child to school becomes something less of a priority. The government have said that something like 90% of the children to attend school, or primary school children attend school. I would say that's probably an exaggeration. I saw a lot of children uh, during school times just wandering about. These tend to be children who were very poor or who looked very poor, and it was clear to me that those were the children who were not attending school. However, I do applaud the government's attempt to reduce poverty and to increase education. I think one of the big issues for me is that because of the preponderance of the Catholic Church within Rwanda and their view on birth control, it makes it very difficult for the government to then try to encourage people to develop birth control and to have fewer children. And I think that goes against the government's aims and objectives, which is to decrease rural poverty and increase education for everyone. Another reason why they want education for everyone is because they believe that the genocide occurred because the people who were encouraged into killing their neighbours and their friends did so because they were illiterate and were basically brainwashed. And they believe that if the country is given an education, then the likelihood of another genocide becomes vastly reduced. Rwandan government are also trying to develop a philosophy of equality. More than or about 50% of the government is actually made up of women, which is quite different to many other countries. And the Rwandan government believes that given the number of women in the government, that again a genocide would be less likely because women would be less likely to sign up for genocide. On a more general aspect of life in Rwanda, it's lived quite often on the streets, and I think that's because the houses that the people live in are very poor, and also because the people in Rwanda are very industrious. You see them out working, you see them walking, they walk everywhere. Transport's reasonably limited except for people who are a bit wealthier. They regularly attend markets, and you can see them bringing vegetables, fruit, livestock to market, and then walking home with livestock, fruit, etc. From market. I certainly got a feeling that the place was very friendly, very safe, very nice. I never felt that I was in any danger while walking about in Rwanda, and I think the people themselves are very friendly. I talked earlier about the genocide and about the spirit of reconciliation, and that to me is one of the most remarkable things about the people of Rwanda. In practice, although I'm sure that I didn't see all of the aspects of it, it seemed to me that the people were actually trying to live up to the principles of forgiveness and reconciliation between themselves, and that has to be something that you have to admire, given the fact that 800 to 1 million people, possibly more, were killed in 100 days. Horrific facts, but people seem to be trying very hard to get over it and to develop a way of living alongside of their neighbours as friends. This to me was one of the most remarkable things about Rwanda and the people of Rwanda, and I think it's something that we in the more civilised, apparently, areas of the world could learn a lesson from the people of Rwanda in how to actually begin to forgive and begin to find ways of rebuilding. So often our society is filled with hatred, it seems to me. Here you can see people packing potatoes for the market. Bicycles play a very important role in the transport system of Rwanda, and you find all of these bicycles very, very heavily laden with potatoes, with all sorts of crops. And not only do people carry things on their head, they carry them on their bikes. How the poor bikes survive, I do not know. The people are having to up and push them over any remote hills, or tiny hills. This is a house made of mud and bamboo. It doesn't have proper windows, and this is the sort of poorest type of house you get in Rwanda. You move on from that to houses with glass windows and painted. You can see here, these are mostly shop fronts, brightly coloured. Health and safety doesn't have a look in here because they're doing all this building work around these shops while people are just carrying on with their normal daily business, irrespective of what building works are going on around about them. You can also see that these villages have electricity, and my guess is they also have running water, so that they're a step up from the really poor villages that a lot of the rural people live in. So the poorest houses are made of mud and bamboo. The next step up, which will be these houses, are made of handmade brick, and you quite frequently are driving along and find rows of bricks sort of lining the streets, and these houses here are the ones that are made of the handmade bricks, brick factories, I guess you would call them. And so this is the next step up. Most of the houses with these bricks, these handmade bricks, have things like windows, glass windows and proper doors. And a lot of the churches are made of this. And then they have the inevitable sort of, I guess you would call posh housing, which would be, I guess, the sort of equivalent standard to the houses that we live in this country. And then lastly, you'll see a picture of a refugee camp, which isn't being used at the moment, but is there whenever it's needed. We had the opportunity to be shown around a typical Rwandan village. The people were happy to see us and happy to show us around. The village itself, as you can see, the housing is very basic. They have animals in their garden, which we were told is not really for food. It's as an insurance policy, like money in the bank, so that if what they or the family becomes ill, they can pay for medication. We were told that Rwandans could only really afford to eat meat once a year at New Year. These beautiful baskets were made to sell to tourists and to better off Rwandans. As I have previously said, Rwanda is a very fertile country, and the village grew lots of its own vegetables, either for consumption or for sale or exchange for other goods that they might need or want.
What do they, have you got the station? What do they do?
Although it did feel a little bit intrusive to be wandering around this village, all the people seemed really friendly and interested to show us what they do. Here I am being shown how to make bread, and this is the honeyman. The honeyman was extremely proud of what he was doing. He was really, really keen to show us how he made his beehives and to show us the whole bee production. And he just kept smiling and pointing at what he was doing. The hope is that he will be able to make money from his honey.
Okay.
So how do they get a queen? What do they do?
The guide who was showing us around the village explained that her organisation supports this particular village. They provide the shoes and the uniforms and the books to allow the children to go to school, so that the village itself profits by our visits. And that is probably part of the reason why they were so willing and keen to welcome us into their village and to show us around. Rwandans love to dance, and here are some children dancing. They invited us to join in, which was really good fun. However, I do not have any footage of that because I was dancing rather than taking a video. And you can also see the love of dancing in these children who were asked to look after our car for us while we were being shown around the village.
It's not going well, you may collect
No,
me.
that was good.
Next
No,
time
is that-
you.
Proper fire.
The kindness and generosity of the Rwandan people were epitomised by our invite to a wedding. We were at a local beauty spot when a taxi drove up, and out came 7 or 8 people, including a bride in her full bridal outfit. We went up to take photographs of them, and they then wanted us to be involved in their photographs, which I understood. What really surprised me was that they then wanted us to come to the wedding. They then took over our car, first of all to take photographs of themselves on the car, and secondly to transport the bridesmaids and the cameraman to the wedding. There was a large number of people both inside the church and also outside. The taxi driver, who is the man in the stripy jumper, explained that it was a very poor village and that the bride and groom were also very poor. He explained that the church had paid for the wedding, and we were also advised that it was an arranged marriage with a matchmaker who had introduced the couple to each other. The church itself looked really poor. There was a gap between the walls and the roof. The roof was held up by pillars, but there was a gap, and the taxi driver explained that the church was in the process of being built. The wedding, as you can see, was a very lively affair, and there was the usual cutting of the cake by the bride and groom at this wedding at the beginning of the ceremony rather than after the food had been eaten. There was a table filled with food, and after the cake was cut, the couple went up and filled plates highly with food. The tradition is that they serve their in-laws and then they come back and piled a huge plate of food for themselves. What really surprised me was we were then invited next to come up and partake of food, which I did, piling my plate up quite high because I thought that we were going to be asked to share the food with someone else. In fact, that didn't happen, and what they wanted was for us to eat it. The food was delicious, but I felt other people needed and deserved the food more than we did, so we ended up giving our food to the children at the front of the church, which I think really surprised them, and they enjoyed, because not everyone at that wedding was going to get food. There just wasn't enough there to serve everyone. Alongside having I previously talked about Rwanda being called the land of 1,000 hills. It's also a very beautiful country, and I was really impressed with all aspects of Rwanda and the landscape throughout the stay that I had there. This is the local beauty spot that I referred to in the last clip in relation to the wedding. People come to this spot as a hot spring, and people come here not only to take wedding photographs, of course, but also to bathe in the hot water and to basically enjoy the scenery around about it. The music accompanying this bit of the video was sung by the church choir that we heard whenever we were in the church service. place those big birds down there. Just the way the nest all them.
No, follow the milk.
There was something about it. No place.
Vai Compassion International. Compassion International. That's why the Compassion International is a sponsor platform.
Go there, you can see your friend.
Although there are nearly 700 species of birds in Rwanda, Rwanda itself doesn't have a national bird, and we didn't really see very many birds on our trip. Bird watching wasn't a focus of the trip, and I lack the knowledge and expertise to be able to identify one bird species and one type of bird within a species from another. Furthermore, I just don't even have the patience to sit there and wait for hours on end waiting for a particular bird to put in appearance. I'll leave that for the pictures. Although there are no motorways in Rwanda, there is a decent network of roads between the major conurbations. Furthermore, there is a major road building project going on in Rwanda. The project is funded by the Chinese government and plans to build a road right across Rwanda, from Burundi to Tanzania. We had hired a four-wheel drive vehicle for our fortnight stay in Rwanda, and we travelled on some of the roads that were being built. Health and safety, well, just didn't exist really. This person you can see here, that's the Rwandan equivalent of a stop sign, and that also the thing across the road there, that's to stop traffic while road building's going on. Other than that, you just follow the trucks through the dust and just sort of hope for the best, basically. As with all other aspects of Rwandan life, there are a lot of people on the roads. Not all workers. People use the roads and have used the roads, I guess, for many, many years and continue to use them despite the road works to carry out their sort of normal business to get from place to place. Here we see the mostly finished version of the road, and this is what the whole road is going to look like eventually. I'm not entirely sure what benefit the ordinary Rwandan is going to make of these roads. Most of them don't have cars and most of them walk everywhere. However, my guess is it will actually open up the opportunity for lots of trade between different countries. Away from the main centres, the roads deteriorate rapidly, and here the 4x4 was absolutely essential. There was ruts in the road, you could hardly drive along it. We were going at like 2 or 3 miles an hour at times, and sometimes I thought the car was just about to turn over. It was quite an exciting and interesting experience, shall we say. Often tourists are recommended to hire a guide to take them or a driver to take them, and I can sort of understand when you see some of these roads, particularly whenever you're trying to get to the sort of tourist trails and all the various things. The drivers will probably know the cars better and would more easily manage all these ruts. So driving on these roads, particularly the rural ones, was just really added to the whole adventure of the trip and to the experience, and it's not something that I would have wanted to miss. Just like the road building programme, transport or people's use of transport was not something that health and safety would have approved of. Here we see a child clinging to the back of a lorry while it's making its way along a road, and in a minute you'll see him sort of finding a way to somehow step off of that lorry. We also found bicycles clinging to the backs of lorries to help them get up hills. Bicycles, as I said before, was quite a major part of Rwandan transport. And again, we can see here the bikes clinging to the back of the lorry, with absolutely no regard for personal safety. But I guess they've been doing it for a long time, and they must have figured out a way to keep themselves safe in what seemed to me to be a very unsafe environment. Rwanda, as I've said, is a very fertile country. It has 2 rainy seasons and 2 dry seasons. That makes it a very fertile country for growing tea, and there are tea plantations all over Rwanda. We stayed for a night in a place called Gazebo Tea Factory. Gazebo Tea Factory is owned by Indians but employs Rwandans to work in the factory and to pick the tea. We were told that a typical Rwandan tea picker could earn between $1 and $3 a day, which seems like a very small amount of money. However, the manager was very proud of the fact that he supplies housing and education to the workers and the families of the people who work in the factory. The manager showed us around the factory and showed us how the tea was produced. We didn't really see the whole production because it was a Sunday, and in a Sunday it's mostly just maintenance that's being done in the factory rather than the whole production of chopping up the tea and making it into this sort of very fine tea that you see here. Gazebo Tea Factory is a very big supplier to a tea company in England called Taylors of Harrogate. Taylors of Harrogate will come out, or the managers of Taylors of Harrogate will come out to Gazebo to look at the tea, to taste the tea, to make sure it's of high quality. What they want is high quality tea that's consistent year in, year out, cup in, cup out. Gazebo also produces their own tea, which is called silverback tea, and silverback tea has a reputation for being high quality tea, but it's like the malt whisky of tea production because the tea differs from year to year, and so people who are really into silverback tea can tell the difference between one year and the next year, and I think a lot of it depends on the amount of rain, etc. that there is. It was really interesting to see around the tea factory, though I guess I was slightly disappointed that I couldn't see the whole production. What really interested me, or amused me, I guess, more than interested me, was that there is a job called head tea maker in Gazebo Tea Factory, and I presume in most tea factories in Rwanda. That is an incredibly responsible and managerial job, whereas in our factories and offices, the tea maker is usually the most junior person. So quite interesting and quite amusing. Although Rwanda is a landlocked country, fishing does have a role to play in Rwandan society. Here you can see fishermen fishing on a lake called Lake Kivu. Lake Kivu runs along the Congolese border for about 90 kilometres, separating Rwanda from Congo. Although Kivu is quite a small lake by I guess by world standards, it's a very, very deep lake, and it is also volcanic, which basically means that methane is produced from the lake from time to time, and that has a problem One, there are only about 30 species of fish within the lake because of mass extinctions every few thousand years. But there's also been incidents where methane has exploded and methane gas has exploded and killed people and animals in the surrounding areas. Experts believe that the best way to minimise the risk of future disaster would be to extract the lake's practically inexhaustible reserves of methane as a source of fuel and energy for local and possibly international consumption. There has been some trials of this on a small basis, and as a result of that, the Rwandan government has committed uh, to a major project to build a factory to extract methane gas from Lake Kivu.
Do you want to take a picture?
Oh, it's gone.
At one end of Lake Kivu, there is an extremely rickety bridge separating Rwanda from the Congo, and we decided that we would try to cross over to the Congo one day to see whether we could visit another country. What an amazing experience. What happened was, in the Rwandan side, people were very friendly, very helpful, tried to show us how to get across. We arrived in Congo with what we thought were passes to get there, and we were basically told that we would have to pay quite a large sum of money to bribe people to let us into the country. And when we refused to that, they were basically threw us out of the country. What was also really fascinating was that the economy of Congo is just really in a total, complete and utter mess. And so we saw loads and loads of people crossing across from Rwanda, or from Congo to Rwanda. And what they were doing was basically taking goods, buying goods in Rwanda, including live chickens, which they would carry like 100 on their back, across the border to sell in Congo. It was really quite a fascinating experience, but it did show the difference between the fantastic Rwandan country and the horrible, terrible Congo. I've talked about Rwanda, about the Rwandan people, about their way of life and the industry, etc. But our primary reason for going was as tourists. Rwanda has a really good tourist infrastructure, including the mobile phone charger at the airport that you saw, and lots of trails that the tourists can go on. They have a really reasonable selection of hotels of various prices. We stayed in one just before we went to see the gorillas, in which the owner offered a dancing display on the first night of arrival, and also dinner by bonfire, which was really, really nice. So I'll let you enjoy the dancers, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about tourists Rwanda. And this is my feeble attempt at joining in with the dancing, which I actually quite enjoyed, even though I looked nothing like as elegant as the people who were doing the dance. As well as traditional dancing, we also went to see the traditional royal palace. The royal palace as it was no longer exists, but they have built this reconstruction which you can visit, and there are guides who can show you around and tell you all about the history and the way of life that the kings had at that time. There were maybe 2,000 people living in these sorts of places, all there to meet the needs of the king. The king and queen lived in different palaces or huts, and they had servants to look after them. You can also see some of the cattle that they would have had, and that was really interesting to see as well. Next door to the reconstruction of the old palace, there is a new palace. This was built for the last king of Rwanda, and it's a typical colonial era building. It's got spacious rooms, wide balcony, and it was really interesting to see as well. This king was not willing to live in the primitive dwellings of his ancestors, and having been in Europe and having seen the buildings there, he wanted a palace like the European houses and places that he had seen, and it was very opulent in its day. The Canopy Trail was the first one that we chose to go on in our trip to Rwanda. We chose it because it advertised a treetop walk, which seemed to us to be quite an interesting walk and would allow us a perspective on looking at the Rwandan landscape from a different angle. There was a short walk to the base of the Canopy Trail. Every trail you go to in Rwanda, you need to be accompanied by a guide, whether you actually need one or not. In part, it gives the population a job, and I think that's a very important aspect of it. It also gives and provides a large income to the Rwandan government, and that allows for the preservation of national parks and also the protection of, in particular, the gorillas, which you will see pictures of later. Here we're coming up to the Canopy Trail and the walkway across it. It sort of reminded me a little bit of the landmark trail that they have in Aviemore, where they have this treetop trail. And my guess is that you can find this in various places throughout the world, but we saw one in Rwanda and really enjoyed doing it. So here we have me posing on the bridge and then taking a little walk along. The bridge was a wee bit scary because it was kind of wibbly wobbly, and you could see not only through the edges of the bridge but also below it, which gave you a feeling that you were kind of standing in midair. But it was really good fun and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this gives a sense of how far up you actually are, and how the trail sort of hugs the trees, the surrounding trees. So it gives you a sense of being part of it, even though it's clearly a man-made structure and built for tourism. Mike does have a slight fear of heights, so he was slightly more nervous about doing the trail than I was, and just at the end of it, you can see a sense of relief at having actually got to the bottom. The waterfall trail that we went on next was one where we would not really have needed a guide, and where in this country we would not have expected to see a guide. However, our guide was lovely. His name was Narcisse, and he actually came with us for various trips. He particularly liked us and decided that he would try to put his name forward for any of the trails that we would decide to go on, which was really nice. And he was a lovely guy who could speak really, really good English, and very, very knowledgeable about all of the areas. So having the guide actually added to our experience, because we found out things that we would not have otherwise done. I can't really say the same for the guide who took us to the source of the Nile. The source of the Nile's a waymarked track. It takes about half an hour or so to get there, and it is the actual source itself was a tiny little trickle of water coming out of the ground. We achieved something that David Livingstone didn't actually achieve, but it was a bit of a letdown and probably our least enjoyable trail. The guide himself just seemed to sort of almost resent being there, and certainly didn't tell us anything very much about what we were seeing en route. And so really, I think I would have preferred just to give them the money and for us to do the trek on our own without anybody being there to show us the way, because we really didn't need that, and he didn't enhance our experience really. But having said that, I enjoyed the walk, and it was great to get to the source of the Nile. The Congo Nile Trail was a very, very different experience. Not only because it was cycling and all the other trails we did were walking, but because although they recommend that you take a guide, you can actually do it on your own, and that's what we elected to do. We took 2 days to do the trail. It's actually a much longer trail. We did a section of it, and the trail takes you through some very, very remote areas of rural Rwanda, to areas that you just wouldn't be able to visit except on foot or by bicycle. It was a truly amazing experience. We hired mountain bikes and took our own saddles and pedals. If you had told me, or anybody had told me, what the trail would be like, I would have said there was absolutely no way that I could have done this. So I was completely over the moon that not only did I manage to actually achieve it, not having to push that much, but also that I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I do admit one thing, which was that there was at one point, I think it was about a k and a half uphill, which I had to push, and there was a young boy standing at the bottom of the hill, and I paid him money to push my bicycle up for me, which I was quite delighted to do, and he was absolutely over the moon at earning money. We gave him an amount of money that his parents probably wouldn't have earned in a day, so he was just very, very happy with that, and I didn't really feel that it was exploiting him, because he was achieving something, earning money, and I was paying him to do it for me. We saw lots and lots of children en route. as you would imagine, and they would follow us and say good morning or good afternoon. I think they learn that in school, to say good morning and how are you, but they don't really seem to know how to reply when you say I'm fine, how are you? So it was actually, the conversation just kind of ended with hello, good morning, how are you? But it was really nice to see a part of Rwanda that many tourists won't get to see, most tourists I guess won't get to see, and it was absolutely fantastic to be able to achieve something that I personally would not have thought I would have been able to achieve, and it's really made me think, should I buy a mountain bike when for some of my trips this year into remote areas of Scotland to climb hills and to go camping. And talking of camping, we did camping in style at the end, where we had this very posh tent situated as part of a hotel with a lovely balcony and a really nice restaurant where we could have dinner to reward ourselves for having achieved our goal. Having got to the end of the trail, the plan had been to go on a public service boat back to the start of our trip to pick up our hire car. That didn't happen. There was a problem with the bus. I think it the bus stroke boat. I think it broken down, and so we ended up hiring a small boat to take us across the water. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it and felt that was a great sort of addition to the trip. Mike was a bit less keen because he's not very good on water and sort of feels seasick at times. I enjoyed it because of the sort of thrill of the experience, but we also again got to see places that we would not otherwise have done because our people on the boat would call in at places and pick up stuff, and this allowed us to see parts of Rwanda and see the way of life of people around this Lake Kivu. And what you see here was the bus that somehow managed to get itself fixed again, but not in time for our trip. I think the guys were using our trip to try to do a wee bit of poaching, but they didn't actually manage to catch anything. And another really interesting thing was that throughout the journey, the guy was constantly on his mobile phone, chatting. So we were in what was a very primitive boat that kept having to be bailed out in a very primitive kind of rural area, and we have this guy on his mobile phone more or less for at least half the journey. I'm not sure whether he was asking about conditions or whether he was picking up things or what have you, but it just was quite a contrast, modern and traditional, all in the one experience. So here we have cattle being washed by some of the people from that particular area, and you can also see in the background some of the traditional fishing boats that they use. I should add that in addition to the boat being quite rickety and constantly having to be bailed out, it was having to be bailed out because of the conditions on the lake, which were very rough. Not only did that mean that the boat was getting flooded, it also meant that we were getting flooded, and I ended up at the end of the trip somehow being totally soaked. They gave us equipment to put on and something around us, but it just didn't actually work. But I actually think that added to the whole experience of the thing, and I thoroughly enjoyed trip. When we had left our car, there had been a flat tyre, and we'd asked one of the people to repair it for us, and one of the times we were sort of calling in somewhere, and on leapt to the boat the man who had been charged with looking after our car and fixing the tyre for us, which was really quite interesting. So presumably one of the things that this guy on his mobile phone was doing was kind of helpful, which was to to sort us out. And here we are arriving back at the hotel from where we had started our trip and on to our next adventure. When you think about Rwanda and animals, you immediately think of gorillas. However, there are more animals to see in Rwanda than gorillas, and we went on a chimpanzee trail. It means getting up really, really early in the morning to go and find them. We didn't see the chimpanzees so clearly as we did the gorillas, but we heard them, and you can clearly hear them. They were high up in the trees. I think that sometimes you can actually get much closer to the chimpanzees, but we were just not lucky enough to achieve that. However, it was a really excellent experience and well worth repaid the early morning getting up and the money that we paid. And then there were monkeys, which we didn't have to pay for because we saw them on the side of the road, and they were just really cute, and they were just kind of running around basically doing their own thing. And I was sitting at a sort of one of the trail offices just waiting to try and sort out a trip or two, and lo and behold, this sort of little monkey puts in an appearance. It was so cute. I just loved watching it. Rwandans don't seem to really go in for pets, this being the only pet that I actually saw. Most of the animals that they have are for use for food, or as I think I previously said, to use as a kind of money in the bank that people have so that they can provide for medication or whatever if a family member becomes ill. So they have a very different attitude and view towards animals than we have. What you quite frequently see is people having their animals on leads. That's not so that they can take them for a walk because they're pets. It's actually so that they can take them to and from market, either because they were selling animals or because they were buying them. But it was actually quite funny when you would see them just sort of walking along the road with a pig on a lead, or a goat on a lead, or cows on a lead. So so that was quite amusing. What they would actually do is tether their animals to a particular spot. So although the animals could wander about a bit and eat, they were really restricted at times in where they could actually go. But I think that's the case in most third world countries, and I don't think Rwanda is any different from that. So here we have some pigs. We didn't see so many of them, but that they were like near the Congo border. One of the most unusual places that we visited was the Rosamond Halsikar house. It was just a typical English rural cottage and garden in in the middle of an African country. It was just quite strange, but it's a really interesting history. It was owned by a woman called Rosamond Halsikar, as I've said, and she moved first of all, to the Congo with her husband, uh, Kenneth Carr, and then when they divorced, she stayed on and moved to Rwanda in 1955. She remained in Rwanda for about 50 years and she became one of Diane Fossey's closest friends. During all the periods of violence and upheaval, Rosamond always stayed in Rwanda while others left. However, when the genocide began in April 1994, the American embassy finally insisted that she had to leave. She stayed in the US for several months and then she discovered that what happened basically during the genocide and the number of orphaned children that there were. So she decided in August 1994 to return to Rwanda. She was aged 82 at that point, and she returned there to basically open up an orphanage for dispossessed children in Rwanda, and she continued to hold that job or do that job until she died. What's really interesting now is that there are still children there, but they're children from school, and what the Rwandan government are doing is trying to close down orphanages and place children who need a home with foster carers. So the orphanage now is actually more of a support centre for displaced children or children who need a home because, well, I guess with the genocide, etc., and in today's modern society, there's alcohol and drug problems in Rwanda, just as there are in other areas, and there are children who cannot remain at home, and this organisation supports the children. And now we're getting to the main reason why people come to Rwanda and people know about Rwanda, guerrillas. Most people will know about Diane Fossey and Gorillas in the Mist. What was really interesting when we did the trail was to hear all about Diane Fossey's life and her interest in gorillas. There really isn't anything of Diane Fossey's legacy left apart from the gorillas, because her home, etc., where the workers were, everything was destroyed. Nobody knows for sure how and who killed Diane Fossey. They think probably that it was a poacher who was disgruntled with her. She had a very kind of almost paramilitary intervention in trying to save the guerrillas, and that was actually interfering with the poacher's ability to kill the guerrillas and make money. So it's thought that she antagonised people and therefore she was killed. We saw Diane Fossey's grave, but we also saw the grave of some of the guerrillas that were her babies, as it were, and it was really poignant and interesting and sad all at the same time, and a very fitting introduction to what was going to be one of the highlights of our journey, the guerrillas. So gorillas are the main reason tourists come to Rwanda, and it makes an awful lot of money for the Rwandan government. It's an incredibly well organised setup. You arrive there early in the morning, you are greeted with zillions of 4x4s, more than I've ever seen in a time, and then you're shown some traditional dancing, and then you get to choose the gorilla family that you want to visit. There are a number of gorilla families, and people can make bids for the families that they want to choose. You're then allocated to a group, introduced to your guide, and then you're taken to the start of the walk. We chose to go to Titus, and that was because there was a 5-day-old baby in the Titus group of gorillas. it was quite a small group of gorillas, so I think some of the other people saw a lot more gorillas than us, but I was absolutely over the moon with what we saw because we saw older gorillas, we saw the mum with the baby, 5 days old. That was the youngest gorilla that they had in Rwanda at that point. And we saw adolescents playing, and we were just so close to them, it just wasn't true. We were literally a foot away from them. And what we were told was if they come up to you, then you shouldn't move, just stand there. One of them did kind of come up towards me, and I started a little bit because, as you can see, they are actually quite big and they're very gentle. But if something of that size is coming towards you, it is slightly frightening. It costs $750 per person to visit the gorillas, and you actually get to see them for only 1 hour. So it's not something that can be afforded by Rwandans and, or for that matter, people on a budget. But it was just such an amazing experience that I don't regret having spent the money. And I also can totally, completely understand why gorilla trekking is such a major tourist attraction for so many people. It was just it was incredible. It's just beyond words how absolutely fantastic it was. You just see them just in their normal environment, playing, munching away, etc. The reason why you only get an hour is partly to protect the gorillas and to allow them to go on with their lives without too much intrusion. But it's also because after about that hour, they just kind of lie down and sleep. So they're really not doing anything too much that you would want to be observing. So it's a mixture of protecting the gorillas and showing people the gorillas at the time that we would be most entertained by them and interested in them. But I would absolutely, definitely recommend it. And so that's really all I have to say about gorillas. And I'm sort of coming to the end also of what I have to say about Rwanda, except that for me, Rwanda's a fantastic country. The gorillas were amazing, but Rwanda is so much more than gorillas. It's so much more than genocide. It's somewhere that I think people should go and visit. And I think the way that they've responded to the genocide and how they're trying to rebuild their country is a lesson that many people in supposedly more civilised societies could actually begin to learn. So enjoy the gorillas, and I hope you've enjoyed watching my little DVD and my sort of comments and mutterings as I went along. Okay, thank you. This switches is cool.
Is the baby, all of you? 1 week baby. Kubanza gusubira hepfo. Ubona barataka. Ubona ko ziriya ziri gukubita. So now you can start to make their nest. They collect leaves from everywhere and make a nest.
Baby is born with hair, fully hair. Okay.
Karamuka.
Take stones off this thing.
Took stuff off this, I think. Yeah.
back a bit.